And I found that through my rehabilitation, when I returned to a quote unquote normal life, it was still with the use of assisted devices. So I was using walking sticks and things of that nature to help me because my balance was still off quite a bit. And I think one of the main lessons it really taught me is that, disability is not something to escape. And I think what's really important to me in this story is that it's not that I was able to overcome my disability. It's not necessarily something to triumph over. It was something that I lived a full life with and still do in a lot of cases, but it's something you can adapt with. And, the assisted devices that I had really gave me freedom. They weren't a prison for me. And so that's something I just think we need to call out and celebrate as well as part of this journey.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Zone to Speak podcast. I'm your host, Juliana. Hey everyone, at Zone to Speak I know how important it is to stay healthy, strong, and ready for every ride, workout, and adventure. That's why I'm sharing discounts on products I personally use and love, each one designed to support your performance, recovery, and overall well-being. Whether you are a serious athlete or just trying to feel your best. And remember, every time you shop using these codes, you are directly supporting the podcast and helping me bring more great conversations to life. Psych Plus, their smart pump is a game changer, light, compact, efficient, and perfect for keeping your tires road and gravel ready. It's also ideal for travel as you can skip the CO2 canisters. You can even change your tire pressure on the go when switching between surfaces. Get 10% off the smart pump and 5% everything else. 15% off down the road cycling gear, beautifully designed and performance-ready apparel. 15% off New Zest, clean, plant-based protein and essential nutrients to fuel your recovery and daily energy. 15% off Oleo's wellness shots, adaptogens, nootropics, and functional nutrients to support performance, focus, and recovery. I take Oleo's daily in the lead up to any of my races, and I have the pre-ride and recovery shots ready for the weekend's big training rides. If you're looking for a clean, effective boost, Oleo's is it. 10% off Cold Age. High-quality supplements, including multivitamins, collagen, creatine, and more. I take their women's fermented multivitamin and creatine daily. 10% off Loop ear plugs, ideal for travel, sleep, sensory recovery, or managing noise at races. 10% off Clearly Not Coffee, a caffeine alternative made with mushrooms, cocoa, maca, and rhodiola. I use it every day for smoother energy, sharper focus, and better hormone balance. 10 pounds off Heal, nutritionally complete, high-protein, plant-based meals for when you are on the go and need something quick, satisfying, and healthy. Also great to take bike packing. 10 pounds off Shocks headphones, the safest way to listen while you train with open ear technology that keeps you alert and aware on the road or trail. 35% off Frey Skincare. Skincare made for active people. I have used Frey for 10 years, designed to keep sweaty skin clear, fresh, and glowing. You will find all the partner links, discount codes, and instructions in the episode description. So go check them out and enjoy these perks. Now, let's get into the episode. Welcome back to Zone to Speak. Today, I'm thrilled to speak with Dr. Sarah Ruggins, the phenomenal ultra-endurance cyclist who just shattered the overall Land's End Johns O'Groats Land's End. She broke this record in 5 days, 11 hours, and 14 minutes, smashing the previous mark by nearly 7 hours. Sarah's story is nothing short of remarkable. A former national track and field hopeful from Canada who faced a life-altering autoimmune condition at 15, losing the ability to walk or use her hands. After years of rehab, she cautiously returned to sport, only to have a running comeback cut short due to an injury. Undeterred, she embraced cycling, took up a bike for the first time, and within 2.5 years, she was preparing for a world record attempt. That journey from paralysis to unbeaten grit across Britain exemplifies true resilience and a belief that life's detours can become epic chapters. In this conversation, I will unpack her transformational path, the logistics and emotional toll of her record breaking ride, the role of her crew, and how she's using cycling to give back through charity work. Sarah, welcome to Zone to Speak.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Likewise, likewise. So good to see your face and smiling. Like I said before, like was really, really cheering for you to break this record. I know it's important to you. I think from everything you went through, I think it's even more emotional.
Yeah,
Tell me a little bit, like at 15, you lost the use of your legs and hands due to autoimmune illness. What was the journey to recovery like? Or even getting that diagnosis must be so hard emotionally.
it was. It was. I think for me, getting the diagnosis, it took a few months from the onset of the symptoms and the progression to really get a diagnosis. But at the point of diagnosis, we still didn't understand the treatment because it's something called CRPS, chronic regional pain syndrome. And when I was diagnosed, it was still very poorly understood and arguably still is. So it took ages, and I kept getting worse and worse until we kind of found a treatment protocol that would work for me and help me rehabilitate physically and mentally. But I would say it took a few years end to end of that rehabilitation process. Um, it involved physiotherapy, occupational therapy, a lot of, mental health support to really help transition me back to what would be like a quote unquote normal life.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like a really tough road to be in, but I'm glad you're able to walk now and have a normal life and actually extraordinary life now.
The whole process of rehabilitation was really interesting for me because it taught me a lot about disability, and it taught me a lot about how people view the world, both when you are, disabled or when people are looking at you as a disabled person. And I found that through my rehabilitation, when I returned to a quote unquote normal life, it was still with the use of assisted devices. So I was using walking sticks and things of that nature to help me because my balance was still off quite a bit. And I think
Wow.
one of the main lessons it really taught me is that, you know, disability is not something to escape. And I think what's really important to me in this story is that, it's not that I was able to overcome my disability. It's not necessarily something to triumph over. It was something that I lived a full life with and still do, in a lot of cases, but it's something you can adapt with. And, the assisted devices that I had really gave me freedom. They weren't a prison for me. And so that's something I just think we need to call out and celebrate as well as part of this journey.
Yeah, 100%. Thank science for all that and get people to be mobile and more independent. You said this still affects you today. How so?
Yeah, so I have residual effects. So with chronic regional pain syndrome, it's something that you will typically have for the rest of your life once you're diagnosed. I'm fortunate that I don't need to be on medication or have a treatment plan anymore. It's self-managed, but I do sometimes get
Great.
nerve pain, yeah, or numbness in my hands and feet, and I do struggle with my balance a little bit now and again. So it's actually quite a funny joke between, my crew and I that my bike handling skills are not very good. Like I struggle to turn sharp corners on my bike because my balance isn't great. But if you stick me on a straight road, I can go forever. So there's ways in which, my illness kind of still shows up. but we find a way to kind of adapt to it and make it work.
Well, I'm glad you can laugh about it. That's a healthy way to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell me a little bit about, you had diagnosis, you went through the recovery, and then you found the sport again, and the running didn't work out because you had the injury, you had the setback, and then you discovered the bike because obviously it has much less wear and tear than the running, which was your first passion. What made the decision, in these 2.5 years that you start riding to pursue, do you say LEJOGO?
Yes, exactly. So LEJOGLE was
Okay.
Lanza and John O'Groats.
LEJOGO, yeah.
Yeah.
How did you come to the decision to pursue LEJOGO world record?
It's a great question. I don't really know how it materialized, but I guess essentially what had happened is once I began trusting my body again to not hurt me, and that took about 10 years from the point of my diagnosis to the point where I was like confident enough to try to start athletics again and revisit that part of my life I thought I had lost. And when I started running, I realized my illness had given me, incredibly brittle bones. And I actually had about 8 broken bones. I had avulsion fractures, broke my pelvis, torn adductors, broke ribs. I needed 4 abdominal surgeries in that period. And I finally realized I was like, enough is enough. Like, I can't run anymore. I need something that's gentler on my body because my new body
Yeah.
isn't up to this. So I switched to the bike and I started the transcontinental races. So I got into my first transcontinental race before I actually owned a bike. So once I was accepted into it, I had to buy a bike and then prepare to race 4,500
Wow.
kilometers across the continent in 5 months. But what I really love,
You don't mess around. You went like to the holy grail of ultra cycling. Okay.
yeah,
That's off.
I think it's because I didn't know much about ultra cycling. So I was like, oh, it's like a holiday across Europe, like not realizing that it's like the hardest thing you could do on a bike.
Yeah.
But what those unassisted, extreme endurance races taught me is that I really enjoyed um, the self-sufficiency and the way in which these races kind of pushed my boundaries. But what I didn't like about them is I felt like I could never really ride to my full capabilities because you're always having to stop and find food. You're having to stop and like fix your own mechanicals. So I started thinking, I was like, there's so much wasted time. What could I achieve if I didn't have to stop? And I talked to my coach, and it was actually his idea to do LEJOGLE because
Okay.
it blends the two disciplines of cycling. So the ultra endurance multi-day events where you have to take sleep into consideration and all of these things with the more pure kind of time trialing culture. That's kind of this lore of like Land's End to John O'Groats. So he said, why don't we just mix
Yeah.
it together? This record looks really challenging mentally and physically. And that's kind of where the idea was born.
Wow. Amazing. And okay, so your coach had the idea and you jumped in. How did you come about to like choose the crew and know that you have the right people and plan this entire journey?
Yeah. So the crew, I would say, was probably the most fundamental pillar of this record attempt. I would say, arguably,
Yeah.
even more so than my training. Um, I'm quite self-sufficient and I'm quite independent. And so, from a crew selection perspective, first of all, I needed people who I could trust to make decisions that would impact my welfare and impact the success or not of achieving this record. So I needed people that I could really trust to make those decisions on my behalf.
Yeah.
And then, second, another principle I applied to building the team was I didn't want cyclists. I wanted interdisciplinary kind of experts. Because
Okay.
in my career, I'm a specialist at building teams and high performing teams. And so I applied those principles to this. And so I said, if I got a bunch of cyclists, there would be groupthink. And I didn't want groupthink. I wanted people who could solve problems and see gaps that perhaps a group of
Yeah.
scientists couldn't. So we only had about two or three people who like knew how to change a tire on the team. One was our mechanic, so he was with me all the time. But yeah, it was, and it worked out incredibly well because we had people from military backgrounds, we had people from project management backgrounds, we had some financial analysts who dealt with all the data and the tech. So it was really incredible
Wow.
to bring all these people together and build a team and kind of build almost like this little family that we took on our little dysfunctional holiday over the course of May.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, you relied heavily on the crew support, and it came across on the, on social media. I was watching every day what was happening, and it came across like how well it seemed that you were communicating and were really a cohesive team working really well together.
Exactly. And for me, it was important that I had strong relationships with each member of that team, but that they had strong relationships with each other as well, because we had strong principles. We wanted everybody, even if there was disagreements, to all be aligned in what we were trying to achieve. And so from the outset, I wanted to make it fundamentally clear to all of them that we are trying to set a precedent, not just for women in sport, but for sport. And we're trying to send a strong message. And I cannot do that alone. I need them to do that and them to bring their best selves to the event, which they did. I've never seen a group of people work harder towards something in my entire life, and it was a privilege. Some of our principles, for example, were we're always moving or preparing to move. And relentless progression was another saying that we had, and we had that taped everywhere in the support vehicles just to kind of get everyone in that mindset from day one.
Yeah, I saw that, and I saw your little note too on your bike, like
Yeah,
a reminder. I like that.
yeah,
Yeah, I have tattooed on my arm. I used to come from triathlon, so that, time trial position, and I can, I will. So every time I would, have a down moment, I can, I will, I can, I will. It does make a difference, a
it
little
does.
reminder.
Yeah, that like cognitive
Yeah.
anchoring to like a positive kind of mantra, I think is so important.
Yeah. You didn't just break the women's record, you claimed the outright LeJoggle record. What were the standout moments for you during this journey?
Mm, that's a great question. I would say there's probably three. So the first one was at the start line. I thought I would be incredibly nervous, but I wasn't. I was calm. And it was probably the happiest I felt that week because I knew going into that event, there was not one single thing I could have done more to prepare myself. In the last 9 months, I didn't miss a single training session. My crew didn't miss a single practice run. Like we were all locked
Wow.
in and there was not a single thing else we could have done. So on that start line, it was a notable moment for me because I said, this is the time that we can celebrate finally all the work that we've put in. So that was notable. The second notable
That's a good
moment,
feeling.
yeah, exactly. And I have my coaches to thank for that as well, that, really worked with me every single day to kind of get me in that mindset and in that physical state. And then I would say the second moment was probably the lowest moment for me, which was the night of night 4 into the morning of day 5. So that's when I actually passed out while riding my bike. I think at that point I had about 4 hours of sleep and I was cycling for 100
In
hours.
4 days.
Yeah, going into day 5, and,
Yeah.
I fell off into a nettle bush, and my crew
Oh
had to come
no.
and pick me up. They had to put glucose, in my mouth and give me caffeine to kind of, like, revive me, but they were able to get me back on the bike, and to have people who care about you see you in that state, but not let you quit, even though it hurt them to, like, make me get back on the bike was a gift that I'll never be able to repay them for. So that was like an incredible moment, I think, for all of us as well.
Yeah, I bet. I saw some of the pictures, I think, from that day 4 into day 5. And yeah, you were looking fresh and strong throughout, but I think at that moment you started, I mean, you still looked really strong, obviously, but you could see a little bit of the inflammation showing more in your face, a little bit puffier. And I think all of us were like, hang on, Sarah. So almost there, almost there.
Yeah, and it's funny. So on that night as well, so it happens in the transcontinentals as well. I get a stress response, and I warned my crew, and I said my eyes will get really swollen. I don't know why. I think it's just excess cortisol, and my eyes swelled right.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and so they had to give me the antihistamines, but fortunately, and this is where the logistics and the pre-planning came in, like they knew it was probably going to happen, so they were prepared and knew what to do and knew I wasn't in danger, but it made for some pretty gritty photos.
Well, it's good that you have like this crew, because like you said, in an ultra, when you're doing alone, you start making mistakes and you start making poor choices because with the lack of sleep, you just can't think straight. But if you have someone there that knows that you want to continue, that you don't want to quit, and knows your, highs and lows and can guide you professionally on the right manner, then you were set up for success.
Exactly. And this is why I think assisted versus unassisted endurance sports are completely different because with unassisted, you obviously need more rest so you can keep your mental faculties, more robust. But what I really appreciated
Yeah.
about trying an assisted event for the first time was that you can literally drive yourself to the very limit if you trust your team and know that they'll catch you and keep you going. So it was an incredible experience. But yeah, two completely
Yeah.
different ways of planning and two different considerations.
And what is the third? You said 3 moments. What is the third? I guess it's the finish.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say the third is the finish. Just having my crew catch me. When I finished, I was actually at the point where I couldn't really unclip my pedals because my legs,
Wow.
they weren't sore.
Just
They were just
weak.
so heavy. Yeah. So I told them, I said, I'm going to come in to John O'Groats, but you guys are going to have to catch me on the bike. And when they caught me, I remember just crumpling and just starting to sob like uncontrollably
Oh,
because it was,
you did it.
yeah, it was the biggest sense of relief I had ever felt in my entire life because I did
Wow.
exactly, and my crew and I, we all did exactly what we said we were going to do, and it worked out. And for that to happen and for the weather to be as good as it was, like there's so many stars that had to align for us. And the fact that they did, it was
Yeah.
like such an incredibly emotional moment.
Yeah. You were covering about 500 to 600 kilometers a day,
That's
right?
correct. Yeah, with the exception of day
Yeah.
one, we pushed it a bit past that. But yeah, that was the average.
That's the freshers you would be. So, yeah. How did you and the crew plan the nutrition, the breaks, and the pacing?
Great question. So we rode to a specific ride pattern. So what that looked like throughout the course of the event was ride for 4 hours, take a 10-minute pit stop, ad infinitum for the week. That was our schedule. Now, we call those 10-minute breaks pit stops because I wanted the team operating like an F1 crew. So 10 minutes does not mean 11 minutes, it means 10 minutes.
10
And
minutes.
yeah, and in that time, essentially, the mechanic had to check the bike. I had to go to the loo. Our crew chief had to brief me on the next 4 hour segment. I was getting sports massage and I had to eat about 1,500 calories in solid food. So
Wow.
they weren't relaxing breaks. And the only time that ride pattern was disrupted was when I would sleep. So I was allowed up to 90 minutes a night for sleep. And that's the only time that 4 hours on, 10 minutes off would alter. And when it comes to pacing, so I worked in watts and heart rate. So we, I did not want to know where I was versus the record until the last day because that was a distraction for me mentally. What I needed to focus on was riding intuitively and riding within my capabilities. So for me, this meant just very deep focus and like almost like a trance-like state looking at that power meter for a week.
Yeah.
So keeping my heart rate, below like 125 and just keeping a really tight eye on that like zone 1, zone 2 power and making sure that I didn't blow it out at any point and just focusing on consistency and efficiency wherever possible. So that's how we did the pacing.
You
Yeah.
guys executed a perfect plan. Super curious to know what was on this 1,500 calories meals that you're getting.
Yeah. So I was eating about 11,000 calories a day. In the pit stops, we started off with solid foods. So things like, the cycling classics like pizza, things like that. By the end of day 2, I was struggling to tolerate that. So we switched to heavy porridges with like peanut butter or jam and double cream, just trying to get as many calories in as possible. Um, I developed a great affinity for bagels with cream cheese for whatever reason. So I was probably having like 6 or 8 of those a day. And then when I was on the bike, I was eating every 20 minutes. So that included things like Mars bars, Stroop waffles, and then I had about 300 precision fuel and hydration carb chews, which they think is a new record. Just to get I was on
Wow.
for about 100 grams of carbs an hour, 24 hours a day. So relied a lot on those. And then Huel. So their shakes, we would mix their shakes.
Oh,
We would
yeah, I know. I have them. I like their bar as well. Yeah, they're friends of the podcast. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, Huel was incredible. So I was having probably 10 of their shakes a day. We would mix them to double strength. We'd put some extra carb mix in there. We would put any extra source of calories in there we could find as well. And that was essentially my nutrition plan.
Well, anyone listening thinking this is amazing, it's actually a second job having to eat all that. It's not an easy thing to do.
It was harder than the cycling. I'm not exaggerating when I say the cycling was the easiest part. The physicality of the challenge was the easiest part. It was the eating and the sleep deprivation that caused the most distress over the course of the event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am sure. Especially the sleep. I mean, I cannot even imagine 90 minutes. But the eating I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
And I know how hard it is that you gotta put in those calories and you just can't look at food anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I ate very much for like 3 or 4 days after because I just had a complete aversion to any type of food.
Yeah, usually after an ultra, I can only eat like white rice, little bits here and there to, keep it alive. But yeah, I can't eat much.
Yeah,
It can't
exactly.
imagine that's completely different effort than my effort. Anyways, you rode to raise funds for the bike project and Bikes for Refugee. What does this causes mean to you beyond the record? What change do you hope to spark?
Yeah, so the Bike Project and Bikes for Refugees are related organizations. So the former serves England and the latter serves Scotland. And what these two groups do is they take secondhand bicycles, they refurbish them, and they distribute them to asylum seekers and refugees that are newcomers to the UK. And the reason,
Beautiful.
yeah, they're just incredible. And the reason I really wanted to call attention to these two charities is twofold. So they use bikes as a way to empower and give freedom back to individuals who face transportation poverty when they come to the UK. So the freedom and empowerment that the bike gives these individuals really resonates with the freedom and empowerment that cycling has given me, albeit in a different form in my life. So I really wanted to celebrate that. And the other reason I wanted to celebrate it is, I work closely with refugees and asylum seekers in my personal life. So for the last 4 years, I've been housing single female asylum seekers and refugees in my home and help them, transition to life in the UK. So I've seen firsthand how a bike can, get them to language lessons, get them, to different charities, get them legal help, get their kids to school. So it's incredibly transformative. So I just really wanted to use the attention I thought that this record would get as a way to kind of amplify the message of these two charities.
That's a beautiful cause and it's so impactful. I would definitely put all the information in the episode description. So anyone that wants to get involved, make a donation, please do so. It is an extremely important cause. And I think even, I mean, that's how we build the country. We have to help refugees from other places and they need to um, adapt to the new country. And how are they going to do that without a transportation?
Yeah, exactly. And I think what a lot of people may not realize is when these individuals are coming into the country, depending on their status, they're not allowed to actually work. And some of them qualify for as little as £8 a week in support, in financial support, and their public transit is not subsidized. So a lot of them are having to choose between getting transport and putting food on the table. So it's actual, frontline remedial work that these organizations are doing to empower people. And I think more importantly, it celebrates how awesome the cycling community is here in the UK. From my experience, it's so inclusive and so supportive. And I just think it's so great that we can use the power of this community to show people that they're welcome here. And there's a whole group of individuals across the country that's waiting to celebrate them and get them involved.
Yeah, bicycle uniting people, helping people. I
Excellent.
love it. Yeah, yeah. Don't want to get away from the subject, but I know you're Canadian and you live in the UK. How was the shift? How long have you been in the UK?
Yeah, so I've been in the UK, it's 10 years now this year.
Wow.
Time flies. It's
Yeah.
I moved to Edinburgh originally from Canada to finish my doctorate at the university there. And I just kind of fell in
Okay.
love with the UK and decided to make this my home now. So
Nice. Going back to LeJoggle, we talked. Mentioned a little bit that after the record breaking, you couldn't eat much. Of course, you endure extreme fatigue. How was your recovery, and how are you feeling now?
So the recovery was actually pretty good, but as anyone knows, when you do these extreme events with such extreme sleep deprivation, and your body's been put under so much stress, when you finish, you're essentially a critical care patient. So I would say for probably 48 hours after the event, my coach was kind of advising my team, like, don't be more than like an hour away from a hospital, just in case, you have any kidney issues or, your body just goes into shock, right? So I
Yeah,
would say about 48 hours after, I was just kind of horizontal and just trying to decompress, but in good spirits. And it took me about a week of like no activity to kind of really start feeling like myself again. But after 5, 6 days, I was back in the gym doing gentle movement, mobility. And then within 2 weeks, I'm back on the bike 7 days a week now, back to my training schedule. But I think that's a function of I was quite high capacity beforehand. So I was in the saddle about 25 to 30 hours a week before the event. So luckily my body was able to bounce back quite quickly, but you do really need to take time physically, but also emotionally to kind of decompress, especially in that first week after these major events, and just make sure you're in a
yeah.
strong and robust position to move forward.
Well, I'm glad you're doing well. And will there be another ultra challenge record attempt?
There will be. Yes, we're looking to capitalize, I think, on the attention that this has received and the precedent that we've really set for women in, you know, ultra cycling, and we have great names out there now like Lael Wilcox, who's doing incredible things. And so I think we'd like to kind of capitalize on this momentum and celebrate women. So there will be another record attempt next year. I can't confirm quite what that is yet, but we'll be expanding from
Okay.
a country to a continent is all I'll say.
Wow. Very exciting. Can't wait to see. Anything else on your focus, on your path, like coaching, exploration?
Yeah, I'm open to all things now. I think what's been most transformative for me in this event is that I always felt like an imposter because I'm so new to cycling. And I think, especially as women, most women I ride with, they start off by apologizing and being like, oh, sorry, I'm so slow. Like we need to take up
That's
space in this sport. And I'm guilty of the same thing. So I think what this event has really taught me is that we deserve to take up space. We don't need to be apologetic about taking up space. And for the first time in my life, I view myself as a cyclist. So I would like to see where it takes me over the next year. I'm interested in both exploration and, seeing in a more casual perspective where the bike can take me and help me cross borders and tell stories. And also from a competitive perspective, help me find new limits personally that I can break for myself as well. So everything's on the table.
very exciting. And I think, not for women, but for anyone, I think it says a lot that don't limit yourself, just because you're new to the sport. If you want to go for something that you think it's big, but you want to do it, you should do it. Look at you. You went through an incredible, tough journey of a very harsh diagnosis where you couldn't even walk to breaking a world record on your bike.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I think what I would counsel everyone to reflect on is if they're looking to set big goals in their lives, to be honest with themselves about where their capabilities are and where their weaknesses are, and dial in your focus on that, because that's what helped me progress. And this concept I talk a lot about, I call it aggressive patience. Change is not going to happen overnight. People see my journey
Yeah,
and they're like, that's impossible. It's not, but what you don't see is me training 30 hours a week in the cold and the snow and the wet and doing all the things that other people aren't willing to do. So practice aggressive patience, push yourself, and then be honest about your capabilities and where you need to improve. And if you dial your focus in on that, there's absolutely nothing you can't achieve.
that's a beautiful message. Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your time and your incredible spirit with us. Your record is impressive, but the person behind is even more so. And I hope we can get more people involved with bikes for refugees, and we'll continue to follow you and all the incredible things that I'm sure you're going to do.
Thank you so much. It was a privilege to join you.
And that's all for today's episode. I want to thank the listeners for tuning in. Your support means everything. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider following, leaving a review, and sharing it with your friends.